Eat one food every morning. Make your penis get stronger day by day. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from noise or force. It rises slowly, quietly, like warmth spreading to the chest on a cold morning. And for many men over 60, that warmth has gone missing. Not completely, but just enough to feel like something vital is slipping away. The fire is still there, but the flame flickers. And every day they wonder, is it too late to feel strong again? To feel full again? But what if strength could begin with something as simple as a bite? A ritual, a natural offering that doesn't shout or shock the system. It nourishes it. One food, every morning. No pills, no pressure. Just nature doing what it's always done when we stop rushing and start listening. This isn't about returning to who you were at 30. It's about becoming who you're meant to be now. Full of life, grounded in presence, awake from the inside out. Because when blood moves, so does desire. And when the body is fed with intention, it responds in ways you may have forgotten were even possible. Your strength was never lost. It was just waiting to be fed. He didn't expect much that morning. Just his usual routine, slippers on, kettle humming, toast in the same corner of the plate. At 67, routine had become a kind of comfort. But that day, something new sat beside his cup of tea, a small bowl of sliced beets, drizzled with olive oil and sprinkled with lemon. "Eat this every morning," his friend had said. "Not just for your heart, for everything." He smiled, half amused, but something in him said yes. Maybe it was a color, deep red, alive. Maybe it was a quiet hope he hadn't dared to speak. So he ate. The next day he ate again, and again, not expecting magic, just listening. Weeks passed. He began to notice things, a lightness in his steps, a deeper breath, and one morning, with no effort, no plan, his body responded, not like it used to, but with strength, with presence, with a heat he hadn't felt in years. Not a firestorm, but a steady ember glowing from within. He hadn't changed everything, just one thing, but it was enough. If this story touched something in you, even just a little, I invite you to comment, and share your experience below. You're not alone in this. And sometimes a small change is the beginning of a quiet return. There is something poetic about the way nature colors its medicine. Deep reds, rich purples, foods that bleed the color of vitality. Among them, the humble beet, quiet, earthy, forgotten in many kitchens, hold a secret. Not of magic, but of memory. A memory that the body hasn't lost the ability to respond. It has simply stopped being nourished in the way it needs. After 60, a man's body becomes quieter. Not weaker, just more selective. It no longer responds to force, but to rhythm, to consistency, and to nourishment that speaks its language. The penis, as simple as it may seem, is not just an organ. It's a signal, a messenger of circulation, vitality, inner heat. When blood flows there easily, it means the rivers of the body are open. When it doesn't, it's not a failure, it's information. Beets and other foods rich in natural nitrates feed these rivers, not with caffeine or stimulation, but with oxygen. They relax the vessels. They widen the paths. They allow the blood to move freely, especially in the smallest, most sensitive parts of the body, like the tip of the finger, the brain, or the erection. This isn't about performance. It's about permission, giving the body what it's been asking for day after day through fatigue, heaviness, silence. And it's not just about the beats. It's the act of choosing, of waking up and deciding. Today, I feed myself with something that honors me, that supports not just my blood, but my breath, my mind, my skin. Strength is not built in gyms alone. It's built in kitchens, in slow mornings, in rituals that whisper, I am still here. I still deserve to feel good. What happens when this food is eaten every morning is not a miracle. It's a reconnection, a daily message to your body that it matters, that your pleasure matters, that circulation is life. And life doesn't end at 60. It begins again when you choose to feed it. It doesn't happen overnight. One morning, he realizes he's waking up less energized. Another, he notices that the morning erections that once greeted him like clockwork are fewer. His steps feel heavier. His breath shallower. It's subtle, like the dimming of a light no one else notices. But he notices. Deep inside, he knows something is shifting. And he wonders, is this just age? Or am I missing something? This is a kind of fatigue that doesn't come from effort, but from stagnation. Circulation isn't just about blood. It's about life force. The quiet, unseen current that moves through muscles, nerves, emotions. And when the blood slows, everything else follows, including desire, including confidence, including his sense of connection to himself. He may not talk about it, but he feels it, in the way his hands feel colder, in the way his energy crashes after lunch, in the way his body seems to need more and give less. And here's where the food comes in, not as a miracle, but as medicine. Beets, taken in the morning, awaken the vessels. They carry more oxygen, more nitric oxide, more vitality to the places that need it most. Over time, the body remembers. The current moves again. The light returns to the limbs. And what once felt like decline begins to feel like reawakening. Because aging doesn't mean slowing. It means learning how to feed yourself in a new way. Desire used to arrive without needing to be summoned. A glance, a memory, a touch, and his body would answer. There was an inner rhythm, spontaneous and alive, pulsing through his veins like instinct. But lately, that rhythm feels muted. The urge doesn't come as easily. The spark flickers, then fades. And he begins to wonder, is it gone for good? This isn't just about libido. It's about identity. When a man no longer feels desire, he begins to question his essence. The body doesn't feel broken, just quiet, dormant. But underneath that stillness, something is still alive, waiting. Physiologically, desire depends on flow, blood flow. And when that flow decreases, whether from stress, diet, medications, or aging, the brain receives fewer signals. It interprets silence as absence. But what if the silence is in the end? What if it's just the soil needing nourishment? That's where one food, taken each morning, can become a signal. Beets contain compounds that increase nitric oxide, a natural vasodilator. When taken consistently, this gently restores the pathways that feed not just the penis, but the entire vascular system. With time, the brain receives a message again: you are still capable. And the body, fed with patience, begins to remember what it once knew so well. Desire doesn't disappear. It retreats, waiting for the right conditions to return. Desire used to arrive without needing to be summoned. A glance, a memory, a touch, and his body would answer. There was an inner rhythm, spontaneous and alive, pulsing through his veins like instinct. But lately, that rhythm feels muted. The urge doesn't come as easily. The spark flickers, then fades. And he begins to wonder, is it gone for good? This isn't just about libido. It's about identity. When a man no longer feels desire, he begins to question his essence. The body doesn't feel broken, just quiet, dormant. But underneath that stillness, something is still alive, waiting. Physiologically, desire depends on flow, blood flow. And when that flow decreases, whether from stress, diet, medications, or aging, the brain receives fewer signals. It interprets silence as absence. But what if the silence is in the end? What if it's just the soil needing nourishment? That's where one food, taken each morning, can become a signal. Beets contain compounds that increase nitric oxide, a natural vasodilator. When taken consistently, this gently restores the pathways that feed not just the penis, but the entire vascular system. With time, the brain receives a message again: you are still capable. And the body, fed with patience, begins to remember what it once knew so well. Desire doesn't disappear. It retreats, waiting for the right conditions to return. He doesn't know when the silence began. Maybe it was after that first night, when things didn't go as planned. Or maybe it started earlier, when he began to notice the changes and kept them to himself. Either way, now it lives between them. That quiet distance, that space where desire used to live, now filled with caution, uncertainty, fear of disappointing. He wants to say something, to explain, to tell her it's not about her, that he still feels warmth, still longs to connect, but the words feel too heavy. Too raw. So instead, he smiles, changes the subject, hopes she doesn't notice. And yet, deep down, he knows she does. The shame doesn't come from age. It comes from feeling alone inside the change, from thinking he has to fix it before he can speak it. But what he doesn't yet realize is that the body wants to heal, and it often starts with something as small as a change in nourishment, a food that feeds the heart and the vessels, a daily ritual that says, I'm doing something for myself, not just for her. For him, beets, when eaten consistently, gently open the blood vessels, increasing circulation not just to the groin, but to the brain, to the skin, to the hands he hasn't used an affection in too long. This isn't about being who he once was. It's about allowing who he is now to feel again. And when the body begins to respond, the words come easier, the silence loosens. He doesn't need to be perfect, only honest. At a certain point, many men stop trying. Not because they've given up on life, but because life seems to have quietly closed the door on certain joys. They stop buying certain clothes, stop initiating touch, stop expecting anything to change. They tell themselves, it's just part of getting older, and so they adapt, shrink, settle. But a man's body doesn't forget. Even if the signals fade, the roots of vitality remain. The issue isn't age, it's circulation, it's nourishment, it's belief. And often, the belief is the first thing to go. He sees messages everywhere telling him he needs a prescription, a fix, a radical transformation. But what he rarely hears is this. Sometimes, it only takes a small daily act of care to begin again. Something natural, something real. One food, taken consistently each morning, can be enough to tell the body we're still in this. Beets, especially when eaten on an empty stomach, help dilate the blood vessels naturally. Over time, they reduce blood pressure, increase oxygen flow, and support the very system that allows the penis to become firm and stay firm. They're not hype, they're biology. But more than that, they're a symbol. A symbol that says, it's not too late. You can wake up your system. You can feed your strength. You can restore what felt lost, day by day, morning by morning. And what begins as a physical change often awakens something far deeper. Confidence doesn't leave with a bang. It slips away quietly, like a tide retreating, without anyone noticing. One missed moment, one long pause, one uncertain touch. And suddenly, the man who once felt sure of himself begins to hesitate, not just in intimacy, but in how he walks, how he looks at himself in the mirror, how he enters a room. It's not always spoken. Most men don't talk about this kind of loss, but they feel it in the tightening of the chest, in the way they avoid certain conversations, in the moments they turn away from their partner's eyes. The body and the mind are no longer in agreement. One wants to feel, the other doesn't trust it can. But what if confidence could be rebuilt slowly, not through proving, but through caring? One simple act, like eating a small bowl of beets in the morning, can become more than a habit. It becomes a message. I haven't given up on myself. Because when you give your body something that supports blood flow, your brain starts to notice the change. Not just physically, but emotionally. The body becomes warmer. Responses begin to return. Skin feels more awake. And with every small sign of vitality, confidence grows. It doesn't come back in a wave. It rises in steps. Quietly, gently, but real. And when confidence returns, it doesn't roar, it grounds. It stands tall, and it stays. He sees in her eyes, not anger, not blame, but something softer and heavier, doubt. She wonders if he still wants her, still sees her, still feels the pull they once shared so easily. And no matter how much he tries to reassure her with words, they land hollow when his body no longer echoes the message. He loves her, deeply, but when the body doesn't respond, affection starts to feel like a lie. This misunderstanding cuts deeper than either of them admits, because for her, the absence feels personal, and for him, it feels like failure. The distance that grows between them isn't made of resentment. It's made of silence, of unspoken fears, of missed chances to touch and be touched. But what if the issue isn't desire, it's flow? What if the heart still longs, but the body lacks the fuel? Beets, consumed each morning, support the body's natural ability to carry blood to places where intimacy begins, not just below the waist, but in the chest, in the lips, in the fingertips. It's about presence, warmth, circulation as a form of attention, and when blood returns to those places. So does connection. The body doesn't lie, but it does go quiet when it's undernourished. With the right support, it begins to speak again, not with pressure, but with truth. And sometimes the deepest way to say, I still want you, is to let your body remember how to show it. There was a time when he didn't think twice about his body. It moved when he asked, responded with certainty, carried weight, desire, and effort with ease. But lately, it feels unfamiliar, slower, softer, less certain. And while he doesn't resent aging, he quietly mourns the strength he used to feel simply by existing inside his own skin. This isn't about muscles or appearance. It's about internal gravity, the sensation of being centered, firm, present, the kind of strength that isn't loud but deeply rooted. And when that strength fades, a man can feel like a stranger to himself, less grounded, less vibrant, less alive. What many don't realize is that this loss of strength is often a reflection of reduced blood flow, less oxygen, less nourishment. The body isn't failing, it's waiting for the signal to open again, to receive. Beets are one of nature's purest ways to send that signal. Rich in dietary nitrates, they help blood vessels expand, increase stamina, and restore inner momentum. When taken each morning, consistently, gently, without expectation, they awaken the current. Muscles feel firmer. Hands feel warmer. Energy returns. It's subtle at first, then undeniable. And one day, without fanfare, he looks in the mirror and no longer sees a body he's lost. He sees a man returning to himself. Not as he was, but as he is, strong in stillness, rooted in presence. He moves through the day doing what's expected, getting dressed, eating, working, resting. But underneath the routine, there's a quiet sense of distance, as if he's no longer fully living inside his body, but just using it to get from one task to another. The joy of physical sensation, the awareness of warmth, of pressure, of subtle pleasure, seems to have gone quiet. He can't quite remember the last time he felt truly alive beneath the skin. This disconnection is rarely spoken about. Most men don't even have the words for it, but they feel in the way their shoulders tighten, without them noticing, in the way they avoid mirrors, in the way their body becomes a stranger during intimacy, unresponsive, unfamiliar, unreadable. But the body never stops speaking. It just needs to be invited back. And sometimes that invitation begins with nourishment, real, elemental, natural. Beets, when consumed each morning, don't just enhance circulation to the lower body. They awaken the entire system. Blood brings sensation. Oxygen brings awareness. With time, the body becomes more responsive, not just sexually, but emotionally. Fingers regain their warmth. Skin becomes more receptive. There's a return of presence. From the inside out, this is not about stimulation. It's about reconnection. It's about bringing the body back into the conversation. Because the moment you begin feeding it what it needs, it starts to trust you again, and from that trust comes feeling. He still wants it. The closeness, the spark, the intimacy that once came easily, like a natural rhythm between two bodies that understood each other. But now, everything feels slower. His responses, his arousal, even the journey toward pleasure. What used to ignite with a glance now takes time, focus, patience. And sometimes that gap between desire and response becomes too wide to cross. He wonders if something is wrong, if his body is failing, if he's being left behind by time. But in truth, what he's feeling is not failure. It's a change in pace, a slowing down that isn't unnatural but unmet. Because in this new rhythm of life, the body doesn't need pressure. It needs permission. Physiologically, slow circulation affects the smallest blood vessels first, the ones responsible for sensitivity, for readiness, for pleasure. And that's where foods like beets begin their quiet work. Taken in the morning, they gradually improve vascular function, helping blood reach those delicate places again, not with force, but with flow. Over time, arousal becomes less mechanical and more responsive. Slowness stops being a problem and becomes a pathway. Touch feels deeper. Erection feels fuller. Pleasure stretches wider. And intimacy returns, not like before, but with more presence, more breath, more truth. Because when blood moves, everything moves. He's no stranger to trying. Over the years, he's experimented, supplements, pills, promises wrapped in shiny labels. Each one offered hope, a quick fix, a chance to feel like himself again. But most came with side effects, discomfort, or simply disappointment. After a while, the pattern became exhausting. Hope, try, fail, withdraw. Now, he hesitates even when something sounds promising. He's tired of being let down, tired of feeling like his body is a problem to be solved rather than a system to be listened to. He doesn't want another shortcut. He wants something real, something his body can trust. That's where the simplicity of one food, taken daily without hype, becomes powerful. Beets don't promise instant results. They don't override the system. They work with it, gently, respectfully, day after day. They nourish the endothelium, the lining of blood vessels. They support nitric oxide production, helping blood flow increase naturally. No crash, no false spike, just a gradual return to balance. And when he sticks with it, just one small bowl each morning, the change begins. Not dramatic, but undeniable. Energy returns. Warmth spreads. Erections grow stronger. Confidence rises, not from performance, but from presence. He realizes now the body wasn't broken. It was waiting for something honest, something human, something that didn't try to fix him, but feed him. And this time he's not trying. He's nourishing. That makes all the difference. Not everything needs to be forced. Not every change demands urgency. Sometimes the most powerful transformations come through consistency. Soft, steady choices that whisper instead of shout. This is the shift that happens when a man stops chasing shortcuts and starts listening to his own rhythm. When he chooses to feed his body instead of fight it. When, instead of feeling like his strength is fading, he realizes it's simply waiting for the right support, the right attention, the right nourishment. One food, every morning. It sounds too simple, but that simplicity is part of its power. Because it's not just about beats or blood flow or one physical response. It's about reminding the body that it's still alive, that it can still wake up, that it can still feel. And from that feeling comes something greater than just firmness. It's connection. It's confidence. It's the quiet dignity of a man who knows he doesn't need to prove anything, only stay present. The return of strength doesn't begin with performance. It begins with presence, with warmth, with a breath that follows the beat of a heart finally nourished again. Because when you care for body with patience and intention, it doesn't just respond. It begins to trust you again. And with trust, anything is possible. It begins with one bite, not of a pill, not of a promise, but a root pulled from the earth, rich, red, alive. A simple beet, eaten each morning, becomes more than nutrition. It becomes a ritual. And within that ritual, a doorway opens. Here are 3 natural pillars that awaken and sustain male sexual vitality. Not through performance, but through presence. When you slice the beet, look at its rings, like ripples in water or age lines on a tree. It's not just food, it's memory. Eating it mindfully, with your feet on the floor and your breath slowed, invites the body to receive. This is the first medicine. To eat not just to fill, but to feel. The nitrates in the beet begin their work within minutes, dilating vessels, awakening capillaries, softening tension. But even more powerful is the message, I am feeding my strength. As the beet opens your vessels, deepen your breath. Feel it travel, chest, belly, pelvis. Most men breathe too high, too fast. But the deeper the breath, the more oxygen your blood delivers. Blood flow and breath are lovers. One moves, the other follows. Practice this in stillness. Inhale slowly as if you're drawing in warmth. Exhale as if releasing old weight. The stronger your breath, the deeper your presence. And with presence, arousal becomes softer, slower, and more real. After breakfast, Take 5 minutes to explore touch, not for stimulation, but for connection. Run your fingers gently across your arms, your chest, your thighs. Notice textures, temperatures, forgotten places. This simple act restores a link between your skin and your mind. The beat nourishes the inside. Touch nourishes the outside. Together, they create a loop of awareness that reawakens desire, not as pressure, but as possibility. You don't need more tricks. You need more truth. And truth begins in rituals this small. One food, one breath, one honest moment of attention. If something in this touched you, even quietly, even unexpectedly, then you already know your body is still listening. And more than that, it's waiting, not for a miracle, not for permission, just for you, for your care, for your presence. Maybe you felt alone in this journey. Maybe you've been carrying questions, doubts, or silence for too long. But you're not the only one. There are thousands of men out there, just like you, rediscovering what it means to feel alive again, one small step at a time. And if that step for you begins with a bite of something simple, then let it. Let your healing be natural. Let it be slow. Let it be yours. If you felt seen here, even for a moment, leave a like. Share this with someone who needs to feel this kind of truth. And if you've already started your own quiet journey back to vitality, we'd love to hear your story. Because sometimes all it takes is one man sharing honestly for another to begin. Every morning is a door. And whether you're 60 or 70 or beyond, it still opens the same way, slowly, quietly, with light spilling in across the floor. You step through it not with haste, but with presence, with the humility of a man who no longer chases strength, but feeds it. One food, one breath, one quiet act of care. That's all. Your body remembers more than you think. It holds stories in its blood, memory in its skin, longing in its silence. And with every morning that you choose to listen, it begins to speak again. Not loudly, not all at once, but in pulses, in warmth, in gentle waves of return. There is no rush, only rhythm, no shame, only breath, no final ending, just a slow unfolding of what was always there, beneath the noise, waiting for your attention. The beat may be humble, but what it restores is sacred. And perhaps the strongest thing a man can do is choose to nourish what he thought was lost. Again and again, day by day, like a river remembering how to flow.